Today, I have a monthly series called E-commerce Agency Insights, and that's a monthly webinar, and it's dedicated to something specific for agencies. So last month we covered marketing with Will from Way Agency. Next month we've got a webinar with Dallin from Dapper Moose or Ink Consulting, and we're going to be talking about agency sales. Today, what I want to talk about is mergers and acquisitions. And I feel M&A, it is going to become an increasingly talked about topic for agencies, especially when you consider, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine recently, and we were talking about the impact of AI on agencies and how we think that that's going to impact the market. I've been in the M&A space quite actively for the last 2 or 3 years, especially over the last 12 to 18 months, much more heavily. And I've got a number of M&A projects that are in progress at the moment. AI is certainly playing an interesting role in buyers. And I think buyers are kind of looking at M&A with a 12 to 18 month window as it stands right now. How AI is going to impact agencies is yet to be seen. So I think the next 12 to 18 months, we're going to see a lot of action in the M&A space, and then it'll probably cool off for a couple of years and then probably ramp back up again as agencies start to evolve. So what I want to do today is I've broken it out into 2 parts. Obviously, you have comments or questions that you can put in the comment section or the chat section, whichever one it is. And if I have time at the end, then I'll go through and answer any questions. But this webinar is a 2-part series. So the first half of the workshop or webinar is going to be dedicated to what a typical audit process is going to look like. So if you're looking to sell your agency, what are auditors looking for when they're looking at your business? I get a lot of buyers or that are or VC funds or bigger buyers or bigger groups. And they'll often reach out to me and ask me to work with them on the audit process for an agency, or at least guide them and give them a sense of direction in a specific vertical, which agencies they should be speaking to. So I've got a fairly good insight into what an agency should be checking if they want to have themselves ready for sale. So that's part 1. And then the second part is going to be focused on what you can do as an agency to get yourself ready. Okay, so a little bit about me for those who don't know me. I feel like most of the people that are on that are connected or on the call now, hopefully most of the people know me. But for those who don't, my name is Rachel Jacobs. I'm the founder of E-commerce Partnership and E-commerce Agency Growth. So my specialty is only agencies. That's all I do in the e-commerce agency space. So I work with agencies to help them adopt new platforms, add new services, scale their agency, just generally the overall health of an e-commerce agency. I was COO of a leading agency previously, one of the first Shopify Plus agencies in London, and then brought in a marketing and a retainer model for that agency, and it scaled pretty significantly on the back of that. And since then, I've worked one-on-one with hundreds of agencies and consulted with thousands. I have a network of probably about 20,000, a little over 20,000 agencies now internationally. So as a result of that, I have visibility into what's working and what's not working. Additionally, I have, in addition to the work I do, but next to that, I run a thriving community of e-commerce agencies. So these are agencies that want to learn from each other, find out what's working, what's not working, just so they can grow quicker and easier. Like the expression goes, a smart man or woman learns from his own mistakes, but a wise man learns from somebody else's. So essentially with the e-commerce agency growth community, that's what we're looking to do, is just help pass on some of those learnings and wisdom to everybody in that community so they don't have to go through the same growing pains. And in addition to what we do online, we also do a lot of stuff in person. So I run a series of bigger conferences, so e-commerce agency summit, and I run that across 3 locations, UK, Europe, and America and Austin. So that's just a little bit about my background. Like I said, I eat, sleep, and breathe. Next to potatoes, I eat, sleep, and breathe all things agencies. So that really is my expertise. And because M&A is such a big topic, what I want to do is kind of just share some of the insights. So just a wee bit more about me for those who don't know. There's 10 points for anybody who knows what these flags are. Or not flags, sorry, maps. It's the flag of Ireland, obviously, or as we call it, God's country. I grew up in between the border between the north and the south of Ireland, and I left when I was 19. Then lived in England for a few years, and then came back, and then lived in Dublin for nearly 10 years. And then we relocated 5 years ago, almost exactly, to Gran Canaria. I now live in the mountains in Gran Canaria. So good for me. And for anybody who's seen, I feel like I get asked this every single time I speak to somebody about where I'm from in Ireland. The TV show Dairy Girls, that is where I grew up. And yes, it's quite accurate. We're all that crazy. And potatoes, I don't really need to say any more than that. Potatoes are God's gift to the world. And then a wee bit more about me. Love traveling. I'm very fortunate with the work that I do. I get to travel all over the world. And for me, one of my big goals in life is to tick off as many countries. I'd like to get to 50 countries. I think I'm at 27 maybe now, 27, 28. And hopefully we'll be over 30 by the end of the year. So new country is always, I absolutely love it. The traveling part sucks. Getting there is awesome. And then with new countries comes food. One of my most favorite things in the entire world. I love cooking. I married somebody who loves eating, and I love cooking. I'd say he loves eating more than me, but I do enjoy eating. So I love cuisines. Mexican food is probably one of my favorites. It's one that I've recently got into in the last few years, but it is fantastic. And then on the other side, then when I'm not doing agency stuff and when I'm not eating my body weight in potatoes, weightlifting or powerlifting specifically. So just lifting heavy weights, not throwing weights around, and live music. That's really the only interesting things about me. So if it's not agencies, we've got nothing to connect on there and your agency is perfect, then there's something to talk about on the other side. So first things first, what I want to do is talk about just the audit process. And I've broken this down into different sections just to make it easier to digest. If you have any specific questions, I'm just going to have a wee look here. Any specific questions, just put it in the chat and I'll keep a wee eye on it as we go through the presentation so it makes it easier. So first things first, when it comes to auditing a business, sales and marketing. Now, I just want to preface this. It goes without saying when you're going to sell a business or when you're getting your business, when you're going through the due diligence process, EBITDA, profit, like all of the numbers have to make sense. That's obvious. But one thing I would say is that if you are getting valued by a buyer and the multiple range is between a 4 to 6x or a 5 to 7 or a 6 to 8 or whatever the number is, what I'm going to share with you today is what gets you from the 4 to the 6, because the 4 to the 6, the numbers can be the same, but it's all of the details that are in between. And typically that comes down to what does your pipeline look like? What do your processes look like? And what do your people look like? They're the 3 key things that will take you from a 4x or a 5x or a 6x to then a 6, 7, 8, whatever the difference is in the multiple. So that's really what I want to focus on today. Obviously, if you want to know what your specific valuation is, you need to get all your numbers together and you need to speak to somebody. And, I can give you rough ballpark ranges. And I think in the presentation, I have rough ideas. So when it comes to sales and marketing, your sales pipeline, obviously that goes without saying. If I'm a buyer and I'm looking to buy an agency, I am willing to invest more money for an agency or an agency that has an actual pipeline. And when I say a pipeline, I don't mean that you've got 3 months or 6 months of potential business in the pipeline. I mean actual channels and consistent channels. And typically for buyers, especially more serious buyers that are willing to invest sometimes above the industry standard, they're not just looking at what you've done in them. They're not looking just at your 12-month run rate. They're actually usually looking at your 3 to 5 years, like previous. So it doesn't mean the 3 to 5 years previously need to be absolutely perfect and all of your numbers need to line up. It needs to show consistency and it needs to show consistent growth, because essentially when somebody is buying an agency, they're not just looking at what you have right in front of you. Where the bigger multiples and the better deals come from is what they're projecting. It's just like in the SaaS space. In the SaaS space, you can see 10, 15, 20x ARR. And what they're doing is they're valuing the projected revenue that they're going to get from the current customers based on the previous growth. So as an agency, you need to be able to demonstrate that. So having a pipeline of potential clients and being able to show that you've consistently been able to generate leads. Now, that comes down to basically data hygiene and sales hygiene. Another thing as well as I'd have here is the acquisition channels. So really what we're really looking for when we're auditing the sales and marketing side of an agency is how are you getting deals into your pipeline? And if I buy your business and eventually potentially remove you from the company or you want to step away from the deal, if that's what happens, do I have the consistent leads in there that I can rely on? That it means that if I take over the business, it's not going to go like that and I have to ramp it back up. So when I say consistent leads, most agencies that I speak to or that come to me and want to sell their business, most of them are heavily reliant on word of mouth and referrals. And they built an amazing reputation in their network, and they get lots of leads through their community of people and the partners that they know. That is not going to cut it when you want to sell your business, because it means that the business is heavily reliant on you. So if you have an agency right now that is reliant on word of mouth and reliant on your connections, you really need to start planning 3 years out to be able to replace yourself as the main lead source. And another thing as well is your conversion metrics. So you're really thinking top of the funnel, how you're getting leads in, what those channels look like. Then you're looking at middle of the funnel, like once you get them into the pipeline, what happens? And then bottom of the funnel for sales, actually converting those into cold hard cash and retaining those customers. So those are really some of the metrics that we're looking at. And for me, if I'm auditing a business, I want to know if I pull the owner out of it and I place, Joe Blogs in his or her place, is that business still going to be viable, or is the business going to take a nosedive? In a lot of cases, when a deal happens, it's so reliant on the founder that when they step away, if you step away and then the team start to churn because they believe in you, then your clients will start to churn. That's a bad deal there. So what I would challenge you to ask yourself is, as an agency, have you got a predictable lead generation process? Do you have something documented? So it could be a mind map, that's also totally fine. But do you have something documented where you can show these are my channels, these are my expected conversion rates from each of the channels? And I think I have it in one of the slides later. Typically, you have inbound, outbound, and partnerships. So your inbound channel is usually around 20%. Your outbound channel is less than 3%, between 1 and 3 on average, and your partnerships is between 40 and 60%. I have some of my agencies that their partnership channel is nearly 80%. But do I have a documented process and way of working with each of them that is not heavily reliant on me? And also to have a look and see where are the untapped opportunities. So there's lots of untapped opportunities. Perhaps there's complementary agencies. Perhaps there's complementary agencies that are serving the same kind of clients that you're working with, but offering complementary services. So for example, you could be an email marketing agency and they could be a design and build or an SEO. And also are there technologies that you're using and implementing with your clients that you're not working strategically with? So those are the sorts of questions you need to be asking yourself. Or service offering. So in terms of a service offering, when we're doing an audit of an agency, we're really looking at the breadth and the depth of the service. So typically I would feel a little bit nervous if I'm auditing an agency that offers 50 services. I don't know how you'd offer 50 services, but you see these full service agencies, you see them on Upwork and marketplaces all the time. And they're full service agencies that offer basically whatever you want. So if it's Pinterest, if it's development, it's app building, if it's branding, if it's TikTok videos, UGC content, we do it all. Typically, those kind of agencies, there's not always the case, but for the most part, it's not a lot of depth in those services. So it means that they're able to offer a little bit of everything, but without really the depth and quality that you want. So for me, really, what is the range of services that you're offering and how do they speak to your clients? I'm then going to start looking at specialization, like what areas are you really specializing in and how scalable company. So I have an agency of mine that I work with in the email marketing space, and we use a terminology which is like, well, what happens if this 10x's? Whatever it is in the agency. If it's 10 times the amount of clients, if it's 10 times this profile of employee, if it's 10 times this problem, how do we manage this times 10? And if we don't have a solution to manage it times 10, then we're in a difficult situation. So really figuring out the services as an agency that you offer, are they aligned with the current trends and what brands are looking for currently? So the market goes through ebbs and flows, and sometimes in the market, brands are looking for specialists in each different vertical. And then other times when they're looking to consolidate their finances a little bit more, they're looking for agencies that will offer a comprehensive services across a suite of services. So maybe they're looking to bring their marketing and their design and build and their acquisition or their paid ad or the paid media spend all under one house. So if that's the case, are they coming to you because you offer all of those for a cheap price, which would never be the reason? Or are they coming to you because you offer those services under one roof for their specific vertical as a client? And that's really where you can earn your bigger money. And then that takes me on to the next point, which is, as an agency, are you being recognized as an expert? And I cannot stress that enough. As an agency, you really need to think about how you're positioned in the market. If mergers and acquisitions, so whether that means being acquired or merging with another agency as part of your growth strategy, are you a specialist in any specific fields? Because it means that your pool of buyers is potentially smaller, but your value to that pool is significantly greater. And so I would really encourage any agencies that are doing this jack of all trades, master of none. We're all things to all people. When it comes to actually selling your business or merging with another agency, it's very rarely the most attractive thing, unless you're delivering those services absolute top quality. Then it's very rare that being all things to all people is a good strategy. Another area as well that we look into is technology and tools. So really auditing what your tech stack looks like, what tools, platforms, software, like what technologies are you using? Are you using technologies that are best in class? Are you using systems that were used years and years ago that are no longer really updated or what people want? And then also figuring out, especially with a valuation process, have you developed proprietary information that can be used and add value to the clients you're working with? So I know a lot of agencies will have built internal systems and tools and products to be able to scale specific brands. In many cases, a lot of those agencies go up and they turn those into standalone products, which is really exciting. But they absolutely add a lot of value to your business. So if you're preparing your offering or presenting yourself as an agency, these are all things that a buyer is looking for that will inflate your valuation. So you're not just a design and build agency or a marketing agency or a paid media agency or a branding agency, any of those things potentially, but you have all this proprietary information and technology that you've built internally to service your clients. Again, the more niche you are with the target customer that you're going after, the more you can create targeted systems, tools, products, whatever, to help scale those clients. And that really goes towards your valuation. And again, scalability is a big one. And then client base. Client base is definitely a really important part of a valuation process. So first things first is client concentration. So typically when it comes to numbers, you don't want one client to represent more than 15% of your total monthly revenue. So let's just say, for example, you're earning 100,000 on a monthly basis, and one of those clients is 20, 30, 40K. This would be considered a big risk for a buyer. And really what we're looking for is I'm saying buyers, if I have the money, I don't, I'm poor. But what we're really looking for in the audit product is you have to, if it's 100K, less than 15K coming from one client. The reason for that is if for whatever reason that client drops off, your business is not at risk. I've had a couple of agencies. I had one agency before and they were doing somewhere around 100K. 80K was coming from one client. And even though for him, that was like a big thing to boast about, and we've got like $1 million client and blah, blah, blah. That client, when they cut the cord, they did it and gave very little notice. And the contracts, they refused to sign contracts that meant that they give a longer notice period. So when they left, we really felt that business was on its knees. It almost died. So resurrecting that agency from the dead was a difficult process. So client concentration is a big one. Client retention. So just retention and churn in general. We're really looking, again, this comes down to projected revenue. So you really need to track and measure this information and really audit your books and look at, this is the clients that we're working with. On average, a client will stay with us for, I don't know, 26 months or 30 months or whatever the number is. So it means that 100K, so I can look and do some projections. And when I'm doing a valuation, I know that I'm investing whatever the money is. And based on the projected value of the clients, based on your actual data, I know that I'm going to be able to see that return on investment and see that money back within a certain time frame. So again, when it comes to M&A, it really is on the buyer side, it's really making sure that they're protecting their investment. And it's your responsibility as the agency or the seller to present all of the information to help them feel reassured, just like selling your house. You know, if you're going to sell your house, you want to make sure that everything, where possible, you're going to repaint everything and you're going to change the carpet. So you're going to do up the bathroom, and that's going to give you your best chance of success. What you're not going to do is let them walk into your house on a Friday night at the end of a long week and be like, take a look around. What do you reckon? How much is it worth? And they'll be like, oh, wow. Bins haven't been put out. There's laundry in the dishwasher. The beds haven't been made. There's food all over the place. There's cardboard all over the place. I'm like, this is not a good look. So just in the way you would do it for a physical property, your agency is a digital property, and you need to look at it the same. And then industries, really having a look at what the diversification looks like. And this is more specific for buyers who are looking to penetrate specific industries. So I have a couple of bigger groups or bigger agency, and they're in the B2B space. They're not in e-commerce, but they're in B2B businesses. And a lot of those B2B businesses have gone into e-commerce, and now they're looking to acquire an agency that have experienced B2B e-commerce so they can bring them in-house. So for them, that's a really important one. So you could be an amazing e-commerce agency, but you don't have expertise in the B2B space. It's not going to be as valuable for them. So really, the clients that you have right now, or the clients that you have on average, are they distributed across different industries? Are they distributed, or are they in one specific industry? Both options are fine, depending on who the buyer is. And I like, if you take anything away from this webinar today, finding the right buyer for what you're selling is absolutely critical, because something is only worth what somebody else is willing to pay for it. So you might think that you have the most prized possession in the world, but the reality is that the buyer doesn't see it that way, then it doesn't matter. And then retainer agreements. I don't know how many agencies I speak to that say, oh no, but I've had this client for 2 years. So it's like they're not going anywhere. If they're not under contract, if you don't have them signed into a minimum 6 to 12 month contract, it doesn't really add to the valuation of whatever your agency is worth. So I really encourage you to examine what those contracts look like and make sure that you have people in full contracted retainers, that they're working with you on an ongoing basis. And this ad hoc stuff, there's really not much projected value in that. So that's the client base, operations and team. So this really is a big one. And I think this is so much bigger than people anticipate. So not just having clarity and what your team structure looks like. So what does the structure look like? What are the skill sets in the team? Do they have KPIs in place? Are they meeting those KPIs? Is the team reliant on the founders in the company? Are they owners of the company? Or are they fairly self-sufficient? So do you have a structure in place where if I remove the owner, then the team is going to be able to survive? So that's a really big one. Operational efficiency is huge. Essentially, operational efficiency or operational excellence, that's where your profit or your EBITDA is going to come from. So making sure that all of your systems and processes are documented, and that you could basically hand over this Bible to your business, and anybody can kind of go through and make sure they just follow this blueprint, and that's the way things are done. Again, that comes because if I'm looking to buy, if you're looking to invest, either merge with an agency or buy an agency, what I really want to figure out is if I throw 10 more people into this business, or if I take all of my B2B clients and bring their D2C side over to this D2C agency, are we going to be able to scale that efficiently, or is the agency going to break? In many cases, and again, it's about 10x rule. If I give you 10x the clients that you have right now, could you scale? And for most cases, they can't. business owners will say, absolutely, give me the business and I'll figure it out. But the experience for the customer on the other end is garbage, and the experience for the team is awful. And then churn, and you're back to square one. And then, as I said, outsourcing versus in-house. This is a really interesting one because I have a lot of people who ask me, if I have a combination of in-house, so whether it's full-time employees, so FTEs, or full-time contractors. If I'm working with full-time contractors, employees, or part-time ad hoc project-based freelancers, is there a difference? Yes, according to the buyer. So depending on who buys you, it does make a difference. There are some buyers where they're very specific. They want a full team in-house. And there's other buyers, as long as you can show that that your team are working cohesively and work is getting done according to when it's supposed to get done, for them, it's less of a concern. So again, matching the buyer and seller is absolutely critical. And then dependency on finders, I've already spoken about. If an agency relies really heavily on the business to get shit done, so whether it's sales, whether it's operations, whether it's referrals, whether it's relationships with clients, this could be seen as a risk for a buyer. So if you are serious about selling the business, so let's say in the next 3 to 5 years or within the next 3 years, you really need to think, you need to put your ego to one side and really figure out how you can remove yourself from as much of the day-to-day and ask yourself, if I was out of this business, God forbid, you were sick one day or somebody in the family was sick and you had to take an immediate leave of absence for 1 month, what would be left standing? Would you still have a business to come back to? If the answer is no, then you're in not a good position and you really need to think about, what can I do now to put myself in a situation where if I need to take a step back, I can. So they're the main questions I have here. Can the agency operate without the owners? And do you have clear roles and responsibilities and expectations defined within the team? One point that I'd add to that, when it comes to defining expectations or responsibilities amongst your team, there's one thing to understand, that kind of vision, like understanding what am I expecting from my team members. The second part then is to communicate that effectively to your team members. And the third one, which I see so many agency owners just fail to do, is hold them accountable. So this is what I want from you. Communicate what you want from them and get it documented. So whether that's in a Asana board or a Notion board or whatever system you're using, and you outline the KPIs or the expectations for the key people in your team, and then hold them accountable, give them metrics, have check-ins, make sure that if you said that you want to achieve this specific task in Q1, break down what are the milestones and check in with them on the milestones. So you don't get the end of Q1 or the end of Q2 and be like, what happened with this task? Delegation and leadership, these are two massive gaps that I see with the agencies I work with. And then, of course, financial health. Financial health is a big one. Now, obviously, this is getting down to the pointy end of what evaluation would look like. But again, we're going to be looking at what are your revenue streams? So where are the revenues coming from? And they may be revenue coming in from your existing clients. They may be revenue coming in from new business with your referrals and your network that you have. They may be coming in from your marketing channels. So whether that's online marketing channels like webinars, workshops, ebooks, white papers. Maybe they're in-person marketing channels like dinners, going to trade shows, running in-person masterclasses, going to industry events. So are your revenue streams collectively, are they reliant on a few specific things, or do you have enough pokers in the fire that if 1 or 2 or 3 of those things are dormant for one, forward? And like for me, that's often what I see, that you have 2 or 3 channels or streams, and it's very rare that all 3 or 4 of them are going to be working at 100% or even 50% at all times. So you need to make sure you diversify. It's just like in the investment world. Are you going to put all of your money into Facebook, Shopify, Amazon, Google? Or are you going to then diversify your funds and have the majority of the stuff over here, maybe 60% of your investment goes into those bigger companies, and that's your long-term investment. And then you have maybe 20 other wee companies that you put smaller bits of money. So it means that you always have some stuff bubbling over. Of course, this stuff is not going to have the biggest return compared to the potential of those ones, but it means that you've safeguarded yourself by diversifying. So revenue streams, big one. Profit margins, it goes without saying. I don't really need to go into detail. I know most people that I speak to when it comes to M&A, they're just like, oh, I just want to know what my valuation is. And they're like, what's the multiple based on my profit? And I have to explain to them, there is so much more than just your profit margin. There's so much more than just EBITDA that you're going to get valued on, or that you should be valued on. If somebody comes to you and looks at your business and they give you a valuation purely based on numbers, I can guarantee you it's probably not going to be the best deal for you. So it means that you need to do your preparation. Payment terms, that's the big one. A lot of the issues that I see with agencies is around cash flow. I have agencies that are chasing new business when they have hundreds of thousands of dollars or euros or pounds sitting there in accounts receivable waiting to be paid. So how do you your business in place and simplify the money that you're owed? That's really a big one. Are invoices being paid on time? Is there ways that you can incentivize your clients to then pay upfront, pay in advance, pay on time, whatever that looks like? And then recurring revenue. I don't know how many times I need to say this, but recurring revenue, it's just a non-negotiable. Like having recurring revenue in your business, it goes such a long way towards your valuation. So I would really encourage you, if you don't have your retainers locked in and you don't have contracts locked in on an ongoing basis, what are you doing? It sounds incredibly stressful to me. I just don't know how anybody in 2025 could be running an agency that's purely based off projects. The stress and the strain that you put on sales and new business is insanity. I think I have something in one of the slides a wee bit further on, but typically what I would aim for is a 75-25 split. So you're aiming for about 75% recurring or contracted, and then 25% coming from new business. So whether that's project work or new retainer work, it doesn't really matter. So for every 100K that you have a month, 25 of that should be coming in from new business and new sales. So that would be my recommendations. A couple of wee things as well to look at: fluctuations in revenue or profit year over year. Like I said, a lot of serious buyers are not just going to be looking at the last 12 months in terms of your EBIT or your profit. They're likely going to look 3 to 5 years back. As long as you can explain those fluctuations in revenue or profit, as long as you have a valid explanation and you submit that as part of your numbers, it won't go against you for the most part. So I have some of my agencies where we've invested really heavily in scaling the team and building out a marketing department and investing in sales and marketing channels to acquire new clients, and they have paid off. It just means for a couple of years, the agency has been sitting at single digits profitability. But now we've invested that in 2023 and 2024. We know that in 2025, it's going to be a really strong year, and we're going to go from 6% to close to 20% based on our projections because the investments were done. Now, this specific agency is looking to exit probably in about 27, 28. So in 2 or 3 years. So at least then we'll have roughly 2 to 3 years of clean runway. And then we'll be able to explain why the profit took a hit the years before and what the investments were, and then show what the return looks like. I mean, that's plans. Okay. And then I think this is one of the last ones now. Contracts and legal is definitely a big one. Just making sure that your contracts, your client agreement, anything that you have in terms of your clients, your partnerships, all of that stuff needs to be buttoned up. If you're not sure, just check with a lawyer. I said get a proper lawyer involved to just go through and double check all your contracts. I know people are using ChatGPT for all the legal stuff to make sure that it's all tightened up, but I think people that have experience in this area, if you speak to a lawyer that is specialized or has experience in selling businesses, if you know somebody that has a specialty selling agencies in the e-commerce space, I have lots of contacts there. So just making sure that all of your contracts are in place, agreements that you have with partners, and anything, if you have any intellectual property, just double check it, all of the contracts and everything like that, it just all squared away. And I would encourage you as well to have a look if are there any, the contracts, do they favor the agency or do they favor the client? Again, if somebody is auditing your business and looking to buy your business, they're looking for where the potential risks are. So are there any risks in terms of clients are going to be able to, pull the payment or pull the project and not pay? Or do you have any dormant legal disputes or issues that are going on that are going to come back in 6 months or a year or 2 years' time? These are things that buyers will if you have two options on the table and everything kind of looks the same, if you have risks on that side, they're almost always going to go with the one that's more safe. And then I'm getting to the big one now, which will be multiples, because I know that most people just want to know what their multiple is. So when it comes to growth potential, again, this is projected. If I'm a buyer, I'm looking to invest my money in hoping to have a high multiple further down the line. Whether that comes down to having a different management structure in place or an influx of leads through my network that I already have, or bringing together a group of complementary agencies. So you would call that a roll up, having a group of complementary agencies together that are all going to feed each other. So I'm looking to secure my investments. So what do the market trends look like? Again, as I said, because we have AI on the horizon and we just don't know yet how AI is going to impact agencies. Is that something, am I looking at agencies that are starting to adopt AI and have AI practices within their business? So they're starting to like safeguard their future? Are there opportunities to upsell? So if I'm buying an agency, for example, that is an SEO agency, and then I have complementary agencies, can I then take the client that I already have in these 2 or 3 other businesses and pour it into this new business, and then take those clients and pour them into the other one? And then in turn, what we're doing is we're increasing the average value per client by increasing multiple services. That's scalability. Again, all of this has to come down with scale in mind. If I'm not able to scale a business, it's too risky. And then the one I think that most people are asking for, or most people ask me for, is valuations and multiple. Valuations, I cannot stress this enough. Something for sale is worth what somebody else is willing to pay for it. So if you've ever been to an antique shop or a car boot sale and you've seen something you really like, and then somebody asks you for a cost or asks you to pay a fee that doesn't make sense to you, at the end of the day, if they think that's what it's worth and you don't agree with them, you're not going to pay for it, and vice versa. So when it comes to your business, having all of the data and the numbers, so all of your historical financial information, so whether that's your growth of revenue, client acquisition, what your profitability looks like, how you've invested your money, making sure as a business owner, it is your responsibility to make sure that you stay on top of those numbers. If you get to a point, you're like, okay, I'm ready to sell a business now, I want to sell it within 3 months, I guarantee you're not going to get a good deal. And the agencies that I've worked with that have been in a rush to sell their business, I would say almost all of them have not been a successful exit. There's been a lot of hoops that they had to jump through to even get a fraction of their money. I even had one agency that sold 3.2 million, and the small print basically said that if they didn't hit certain numbers within a very short time, and it did. So they basically handed over nearly 3 million worth of contracts, 3 million worth of annual contracts for less than $1 million. And yeah, that was a very painful lesson. Even a margin. So of course it goes without saying, when it comes to your EVA, your profit margin, you should be aiming somewhere between 15 and 25%. 15% would for sure be on the low end, but the bigger the agency is, the harder it is to maintain those profit margins. So agencies that are between 5 and 10 million, generally speaking, they're usually hovering somewhere between 15 and 20%. So 17, 18 is pretty common. But my recommendation is you should be aiming between 20 and 30% where possible. So you really need to think about like the salaries that you're pulling out of the business, the dividends that you're drawing from the business, all of these things factor in. And then exit multiples. So typically if you're below 2 million EBITDA, your multiple is somewhere between a 3 to 6x, roughly. That's a rough benchmark. So if you're doing 500K in profit, I would expect to see probably somewhere between maybe 1 to 1.5 million. Now, 1 to 1.5 million might not be 1 to 1.5 million in cash. You have to then consider you're going to get your taxes taken like that. So if it's 1.5, it's going to be closer to 1 or just below 1. And then that payment is going to be split out. In some cases, you're going to have a combination between shares and cash. So again, these are all factors that you need to consider. I'll go through that in a couple of slides. So my encouragement when it comes to valuation, as a business owner, you need to decide what you're looking for. in order for you to get the valuation that you want, you need to first decide, okay, I want to walk away with 2 million cash. Then when you know you want to walk away with 2 million cash, you then work back from that number and figure out, okay, 2 million in cash equal X amount before taxes. And in order to get that money, then I need to achieve this amount of revenue. This is what my team size looks like. This is how many deals I need to get in. And this is how long I need to do that for. When I work with agencies that are serious about sales and we go through this process together, it makes such a big difference. And they're actually able to achieve the numbers they want, as opposed to being sold for the number that somebody else is willing to pay for them. And then, of course, risk and liabilities. I mentioned this on a couple of the slides, but client dependency is just such a big one, like how dependent you are on specific clients. Being overly dependent on a platform. So there are some platforms we've seen over the years, platforms that have just died. So if you're too dependent on one specific platform or one specific tool that doesn't have almost a guaranteed roadmap. I mean, if you're working with Shopify, for example, we know that Shopify is going to be around for a long time. So we don't really need to worry whether that's going to go bust or not. Then if you're working on Magento, I'm not saying Magento is going anywhere, and I'm not against Magento, but a lot of agencies are moving up Salesforce, moving up Magento. So how that's going to impact the platform, we have no idea. So just really consider these kind of factors. And then turnover or churn. So whether it's client churn and employee churn, do you have systems in place to be able to manage that should it happen? So that's part one. Part two is much quicker. I've been talking for about 40 minutes. Let me just double check here and see, do I have any questions? No, I think a couple of questions, but I'll come through to those at the end. Okay, so what can you do now that I've gone through what an audit process typically looks like, or what auditors are looking at when they're going through your numbers and doing the, as you call it, due diligence? Now we have that one squared away. What I want to do is just give you some of the pointers. These are easy fixes that agencies can put in place to start working towards having a healthy exit. So first things first is your sales department. Again, if the business is reliant on you as a business owner, if it's fully reliant on you, it is going to affect your multiple, and it is going to impact your ability to walk away from the business. One caveat I would say, when it comes to selling your agency, there's some agencies that just want to sell and then they want to be out within a year or two. And there are some people that don't want that. They actually want to merge with a bigger agency and have that as part of their growth strategy, and they want to continue growing with that business. So if you're the latter and you want to be part of a bigger engine and then be absorbed or merge into that bigger engine, having a sales department is going to give you an added advantage, but it is not the most important thing. If you're a business owner that absolutely wants to walk away from your business, this is critical. So first things first, create a sales process that others can actually follow, and make sure that when it comes to training your team, you have a team of people that know what they're doing. I did a video recently. I have a YouTube series called Ecommerce Agency Wisdom. And one of the guests was one of my agencies over in the UK. And Becky was saying that one of her biggest mistakes or biggest regret she's made was walking away or handing over sales too quickly and not sitting on top of the sales process. I would argue from my experience, sales is probably the hardest thing to delegate and let go of as a business owner, because nobody does it quite as good as you. There are some occasions where I have some agencies where they're hired rock stars for salespeople, but for the most part, nobody does it quite like you do it. But that's fine, because if 70% what you do, then that's also totally fine, because at the end of the day, putting you out of the business is the goal here. So sales department is the first one. I think I already mentioned this. I gave these metrics earlier on. When it comes to your sales channels, typical close rates that I would expect from the industry, partnerships is between 40 and 60%. So on average, 50%. So 1 in 2 deals that you get from a partner, you should expect to close. If your numbers are drastically lower than that, then there's a problem. If your numbers are drastically higher than that, not too much of a problem, because it means that you have done well to really build up those lead channels. I would just want to make sure that those lead channels are not reliant on you specifically. When it comes to inbound, if your numbers are drastically higher than 20%, you're too cheap. You're too cheap, or you're not qualifying your leads properly. And if your 20% is significantly lower, so inbound is everything that's coming through into the channel, not from a referral from somebody in your network and not through something that you've done cold outreach, but they've come in through your website or through LinkedIn or through an event that you've done or a webinar that you've done or something like this. If it's significantly below 20%, you're doing something really wrong. Like you're really doing something wrong. Quality of leads. You're either being too strict, you're too expensive. The quality of leads is not right. And then outbound is the nut that everybody has been trying to crack. And unfortunately, because of COVID and the massive boom to the e-commerce industry, with the built with lists, I know there's lots of different tools that people use to pull data. Everybody has just been hammering those lists over and over and over again. And this less than 3% is what it used to be. Right now, for the most agencies, it's less than 1%. So while it is a channel that I would encourage you to have in place, if it also equally is a channel that is very difficult to get right. So I would plug away at that one. So whether it's cold email or whether it's like cold outreach or cold calling, whatever it looks like, there are some companies that I know that do it very well. They are very expensive. They are very, very, very expensive. I know there's one team and it's an $80,000 contract engagement. Now they say that they're going to be able to get you the returns, and I'm sure if it was 80K and you turned it into 800, they spend up money. They could have that money. You know, I say don't. So sales channels, make sure that you're implementing a scalable system so you have consistent leads coming in. So that's getting your marketing and your sales funnels working in unison. And again, the scalable services that I talked about earlier, really focus on services that you can scale. So if you're planning to introduce more services, don't plan to introduce services that are reliant on you specifically. So let's just say it was e-commerce consulting was the service that you wanted to get in place. Is that a scalable service? Technically, yes, but you're going to have to work really hard to find people that can do the consulting to the level that you're going to do it, and then train those people up and then let them free, and they're expensive. So you need to really think about, if I have SEO services that I have the right systems and tools in place, and I can have project managers or account managers sitting on top of it, and I can scale it out. So that's something scalable. Something that is specifically around the consulting, just like the work that I do with agencies. I have 12 or 13 agencies that I work with one-on-one, because I can't stretch myself much more than that. I want to be able to give the level of support that these agencies need. And that means that I'm not scalable more than fun. Terrifying. So I wouldn't do that to my husband or anybody else that knows me. And then really focus on a niche. Like I can't say that enough. For me, the best deals that I've seen are with the agencies that have a specific niche and have a clear idea of who they are as an agency and who they're targeting. And diversification, as I mentioned before, 15% is the magic number here. So a single client should never be more than 15%. If you have a client that is at that number, over that number, then all you really need to do is just focus on diluting the concentration. So that means adding more clients in so you can get the balance right. And you don't really want to have too many big clients. If you have like three or four of your clients and they're taking up 50 to 60% of the total revenue, that's a little bit crazy. That feels like a little bit stressful, because one or two of those drop off and so much of your focus is there, and you start dropping off the wee ones and then the big ones go, and you're in a really sticky situation. So just really look at acquiring multiple clients or adding additional services per client to increase the average value per client. The recurring revenue. So I talked about this earlier on. When it comes to recurring revenue, my recommendation is 75, 25. So 75% recurring, 25% new business. They're the numbers that you should be aiming towards. So again, if it's a 100K monthly goal, then it's 75 should be contracted or from your existing clients, and then 25 coming from new business. It means then when you have a salesperson in place, go back to the slide we said at the start, building on your sales department. If I know that 25% needs to come through from new business, and let's say in this case it's 25K, then that means it's 150, 300K. And that's kind of a small target for a salesperson, but 300K or if you were going to 10x that, a 3 million target that salesperson would have. I think 3 million is probably too much, but I think a sales target on average for most salespeople, somewhere between 500,000 and 1 million an expected sales target that a salesperson would have. And again, when it comes to your sales team, one of the things I should mention is there's a massive difference between having a setter, so somebody who's setting appointments and bringing business in for you, and a closer. My recommendation is, if you're building out your sales department, focus on the bottom end of the funnel, because for most people, when they say I need help with sales, they mostly need help with acquisition. Unless you're in a situation where you have an abundance of leads, and if you're in that situation, then it's challenging, but it's a better position to be in. At that stage, then you want to bring in somebody who can close. But my typical recommendation is to have somebody on the bottom end who's doing an SDR, a sales development representative who's doing the appointment setting, who's doing the qualification, and then you get them through the funnel and it gets through then. So as a closer, you're the person that's having a conversation with a qualified lead who actually has money to spend. You can groom that person up through the sales process and they eventually could become a closer. But initially, that's kind of what I would look at when it comes to hiring. Okay, so management team, that's definitely a big one. I said this earlier, define what you need, communicate what you need, delegate what you need, and hold them accountable. Most agencies that I speak to are not doing all of those. In some cases, agencies I speak to are doing none of those. But it's very rarely to make I had a conversation with an agency recently, and we have, I would say, probably the wrong person in his team according to his leadership style. And his leadership style is definitely, he's the kind of leader that likes to empower people. But because he has people in his team that make excuses and don't have a problem solving mindset, he's gone from being an empowering leader to an enabling leader. And it's creating this like vicious cycle of chaos within the company. So really challenge yourself again, this is putting ego to one side and really think about, as a business owner, what do I need to make me be the best leader that I can be? In my case, I know that I work frantically and I can be a little bit chaotic and I'm like kind of all over the place and I sort of thrive in chaos, although I'm trying to purge that demon. But I sort of thrive in chaos. So I need people on my team that are fairly self-sufficient and are proactive and have good decision making and can kind of just get shit done. If they're just reliant on money all the time to fix problems and resolve stuff, we're just going to be, I'm going to be a bottleneck to my own chaos and my own growth. So really think about the people you have in the team. And when you have that management structure, they should separate you as the business owner from the rest of the team. So you no longer become a bottleneck to getting stuff done. So make sure you have managers and leaders in place that are going to gel really well with your personality type, that they understand how to adapt to the nuances that comes with being a leader. Delegation, again, I spoke about that earlier, but being able to delegate is such a top skill that most people just don't have. Standardization, I have to do this for my business as well. I spent a week or so ago, Sunday night, probably about 5 or 6 hours at the laptop until 1 or 2 in the morning, just documenting some of the new systems and processes that we're using internally for all of this content creation. I can't expect anybody in my team to understand how I want things done if I don't document and communicate it to them. So just because you have a conversation with someone and say, okay, well, we're going to be using this tool and we're doing it that way, it's going out on Wednesday and I want it to be uploaded into this one. Just because you said that to people, it doesn't mean that people remember or know that's what you want done. So I'd really challenge you, before you have those conversations, write it down. And then when you go through it with them in person and show them in real time, and you're like, oh, I forgot to add this one, or I forgot to put in this one, or does this make sense? And then you have a proper process in place. And a big one that I would say as well, when it comes to valuations, again, there's a couple of things that, in terms of mergers and acquisitions, probably 3 things I want people to take away from this call, a webinar, whatever. Number 1 is something is only worth what somebody else is willing to pay for it. So if mergers and acquisition is really part of your exit strategy or part of your long-term goal for your agency, you need to do the work now. You need to start planning, I would say, about 2 to 3 years out, and start getting out and about with people, meeting people, building relationships, because the best deals are made at the bar or at the restaurant or at an event, because you meet people, you break bread with them, you have a nice time together, and you're like, I'd love to do business with you. And then you figure out a way. when you have that depth of relationship with another agency or with a potential buyer, all of this nuance of how much we're worth and let's negotiate and I want this and you want that, it just makes it all so much easier because you already have that foundation of respect. So that's first. The second thing that I would say is, as I have here, your price, my terms. So if you go to a buyer and technically on paper, let's just say you have a 1 million, your EBITDA is 1 million. And then you say, I want a 4 million exit. Okay, that's definitely on the high end, a 4 million exit. That's definitely, you're looking for a lot of money. Okay, I'll give you the 4 million, but in order for you to have that 4 million, this is what I want from you. You have to stay in the business for 5 years or 4 years or 3 years. And the 4 million is going to be paid out on these terms. So you really have to consider what is most important to you. If that's getting that 4 million exit is what's most important, you have to accept that the control then goes over to the person who's buying you and they get to set the terms. So again, going back to my first point about something is worth what somebody else is willing to pay for it. If you do the work now and start to build those relationships that you can then harvest further down the line, you're going to be in a better position where it's like, listen, we both think so let's figure out terms that make sense for both of us. So that's the second takeaway. The third takeaway I would say is really consider whether acquisition is what you want. The process for that, the process is kind of the same, but the process for acquisition, I would say, is more intense, or merger. I think most agencies, when I speak to agencies and when I run these workshops, I've run these workshops in person a number of times, and I've got one coming up in Vegas for Shop Talk. I've got one coming up in London in May and another one coming up in New York in June. And I have one in New York this month, actually. So when you have these sort of conversations with agencies, the same feedback I get from every single time, the agency is like, oh, I just didn't consider merger as part of my strategy, but actually it makes way more sense for me because it allows me to be part of something that's already on the trajectory and that I can continue to grow with that business. And then as and when I want to leave, I can do that further down the line, but I'm not ready just yet. So acquisition is really for the agency owners or the agencies. They're kind of done and they already have their next steps figured out. So either just like, listen, I'm done with this, it's super crazy, or I know what I'm going to do next. Otherwise, if you're not in that situation, I think merger. So there are the three things: your price, my terms, something is worth what somebody else is willing to pay for it. And the third one being really consider whether action is what you want or being part of a merger, being part of a roll-up. And that's really it. Wow, I did really well, if I may say so myself. Don't really have much time for questions, but I feel like my presentation was so comprehensive that it's just not necessary because I just answered everything because I've done this so many times. No, I've done this presentation a few times now. What I'm going to do is I actually have a wee guide here. It's called Scaling to Sell, and it's like an ebook or a Google document that I have that breaks down a lot of this stuff in a lot more detail. So when this recording is done, what I'll do is I'll then share these documents. So there's a wee guide here. There's a second one that might be interesting. So for people that are looking to buy, so there may be agencies that are watching this that are interested in buying other agencies as part of their growth strategy. So for those that are looking to buy, there's a checklist here that typically you should be following when it comes to valuing or evaluating other agencies. And then finally, I cannot recommend this book enough. Built to Sell. I have it over here. I've read it a couple of times. But this book, If Exit, whether you sell your business or don't, the process should be the same. You should be following the same process. And basically what this book does is it teaches you as a business owner to build a business that isn't reliant on you. So I would, if you haven't read this book, I would 100% buy this book. It's a couple of euro, €5 or $10 or whatever it is online. Buy this book. And that's really everything. I think we're coming to the end of the presentation. I don't know if this just automatically shuts off or if it runs on for a little bit more. So if there's any specific questions, you've got my email address here and you can shoot me over an email. I will get this recording and all of the resources. I'll get the recording uploaded into YouTube and then send you over the link if you want to watch it back. And if you want to jump on a call and have any specific questions, it will cost you 1 million euros for consultancy calls. I'm just joking. That's a little bit crazy. 500,000. If you have any specific questions about M&A, just give me a shout. But otherwise, I think that's us. I think we're done. So thank you for joining, and give me a shout over email if you need anything.